Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I want to concentrate on finishing off the track work here in the goods yard or the freight yard, depending on which version you're building. And for that, we're going to be using flextrack throughout because we've already finished laying the ladder down into the yard. And so really the only thing left to be done is to get these yard tracks finalized, to get them laid, and then, we can move on to doing stuff like adding some of the scenery, the ballast on the track, and all of that kind of thing that needs to be done, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, before we get started, I want to ask you to take a second to subscribe. Click on the subscribe box, and when that comes up, click on the little bell right next to it and click all. That way you'll be notified every time that I upload a new video. We're going to go ahead and start with this long, straight piece of track that runs through here. And I've already got the magnet. We installed the magnet in a previous video, so that's all lined up and ready to go. And I've got my center line laid out here on the piece of track so we can get it straight. But there's one thing that you need to check when you're setting these things up, and I'm going to pull this piece of track out of the way to show you. There we go. When you lay your cork road bed, you want to make sure that you've got it in good and flat and level, okay? Now, I generally have found that the green foam or these various foam products, they're produced on pretty good controls, and they are fairly level. So I really haven't run into any problems with this, but it's always a good thing to check. And the same goes for the cork. But you need to get that good distribution of the adhesive spread out like that so you don't get any bumps built in there. But at any rate, one thing, quick and easy way to check is to go ahead, lay out a yardstick on your long stretch of cork, and then take a look and look underneath of the yardstick. And you could even put a flashlight behind it. And then look to see whether or not you've got any light coming through underneath of the yardstick. And that'll give you a hint right there. It'll show you exactly where you have an area that needs some attention because, shallow gradients are nothing, okay? Trains can take that. But if you get, dips and humps built in, steam locomotives in particular are very sensitive to that because they've got, 4, 8 or more drivers, okay? And they're all in line and they're rigid. So they will tend to tip. If they go over a bump or a little bulge in the track, they're going to bounce around a bit, and it could even make them derail. Also, one other way to test in a shorter section is to just get a steel ruler and do the same thing with it. Lay it out there and look for any bumps, okay? And look for any light coming in underneath of it. And that's the fastest way I know to check for those things. Then, if you do have any kind of bumps, go ahead and get yourself a sanding block like this one. This is a 3M sanding block, and you can just take a piece of sandpaper and put in there, and then you can sand it down to get a nice smooth surface if it's a bump. If it's a dip, then you're probably going to have to work further back in order to bring everything down to a fairly constant grade. And, that's something that just takes a few minutes. I personally have never run into any problems with it. I have areas on the layout that might dip, but it's over several feet, 6, 7, 8 feet, and I'm not concerned with those kind of things. What I'm concerned with are very short areas that have dips in them or humps in them, and you want to take care of that right off. Okay, let's move on and take care of some aspects of working with flextrack. Now, I told you the other day about how to go ahead and cut out the tie plates or the chairs, as they're called on British or on UK track. Just snipping it out right there and right there like that, so that you can mount your rail joiners easily. Okay, this way the rail joiner, if I can get it on the end of the rail here, will slide right up under there. And in some cases, if you actually need to drop a piece of track into a location between two other pieces, one thing you can do is go back 2 ties, and that way the entire rail joiner can be slid all the way up in here. And then you can drop it in and bring it out. And you can get away with 2 ties without any problem. The adhesive will hold everything in place fairly well, as will the rail joiners hold the rails straight. So that's one thing to be aware of that you might want to try in some situations. Like if you have to replace a section of track, or if you've gotten ahead of yourself and laid 2 turnouts and you need to insert a piece of flextrack in between them. Now, as I've said before, I use flextrack entirely. I haven't used set track in years. And as I explained, set track is track that normally comes with train sets. And it typically is in given lengths of straight track that doesn't bend very easily. It's not made to flex. And it might be, 9 inches long. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've even looked at it. And it will come in predetermined radii for the curves. So you might get 18-inch radii, you might get 22-inch radii, whatever is available. And you're limited to using that radius in those specific sections. So it's much more limiting than flextrack. Flextrack, not only can it be bent and flexible, it's very flexible in how you can use it. Because you can take a 3-foot section and bend it into any curvature you want for your model railroad, or cut it to any length that you need for the railroad. Okay, so I've gone ahead, I've got all of this set up here. So let's go ahead, I'm going to reinstall rail joiner here on the end. Get that in there. And we're going to slide that into place here. So what we need to do then is make sure that this is set up straight. And the best way to do that is to get down at one end of the track or the other and just sight down the line of the track. And that's the easiest way in the world to see whether or not there are any deviations, any shifts that might have been created during the process of handling the track. And go ahead and just work those out as you go down the track. You can work it with your hand and get that straightened out, because you want these sections of track to be nice and straight. You don't want your locomotives swimming down the track like that and wobbling and bobbling all over the place. So get the track roadbed level, get the track level, and then get the track straight when you get ready to set it up. Okay, what I want to do now though is go ahead, and we want to get down to the end of the track and cut that off because it's longer than the actual location that we have. So what we have here at this end of the track, you can see the cork roadbed extends to here, and the track extends past it. That's because this is a 3-foot length of track. So we need to cut this off, and there's several different ways you can do this. You can use a Dremel cutoff disc here to remove that. I don't particularly like doing that in a situation like this. Instead, I like to use Juron rail cutters. Now this particular one is used primarily, as I understand their instructions, this one I believe is for horizontal cuts. This one they say is for vertical cuts. So we could take this, and you always want to cut the flush side, because the way these work is they have an angled cutter right here, and then it's flat here on the back. Okay, and so when they pinch together, it's going to give you an angled cut on this side and a flush flat cut on this side. So if you take this and put it in here like so, and just give it a cut, this cut here is going to be flush. Whereas this piece here, you probably can't see that, but it's angled because that was the angle of the blades themselves. So the easiest thing to do then is always make sure that the end cuts that you want to keep on the layout are cut with the flush side of the pliers, okay, like this. These are tools that are specially made for cutting nickel silver rail. So you should use these. Don't try to use your household wire cutters, that kind of thing, because they won't give you the same nice, sharp, clean cut that you want to get with a pair of these cutters. I went ahead and removed the track so that we can lay a bead of adhesive down here, as I've showed you in the past. So I'm just going to run it all the way down here, and I'm going to jump across the magnet and run up to the end of the ladder. Okay. And then just go ahead and spread a good layer of adhesive up and down the cork road bed. And one other thing I'll point out, and this came up in one of the comments and discussion after one of the videos. One thing you can use in order to do this, instead of what I've done here, you can purchase in-scale cork road bed like this cork road bed here, and use that for yards and sidings and things of that nature. And then you get the two elevations without having to deal with cutting this sheets of cork. So that's one option available. Of course, it's not going to be as wide as the standard HO and OO would be, but you can deal with that by simply putting a piece of cork filler in between the two pieces that make up the road bed. So you can build up that extra width as need be. Okay, so I'm going to bring my my piece of rail up, give it a tap to make sure it's straight as I can get it up front, and we'll slide it in to the rail joiners up at the far end. And that may take a little trying, so excuse me. And then I'm going to drop it into place. And then what I want to do is I'm going to step back and I'm going to check and make sure that it's running straight and true here. And then we'll make adjustments. Okay, it's got a little bit of kink right down here. So all you have to do is just give it a little push and straighten it out, and then take another sight down the line, pull it back over just a touch. Now another thing you can do is to take your metal yardstick and place it alongside of the rails. Okay, and then just run your finger along that. And that should also give you a good straight shot. So let me take a look. That did it perfect. Okay, so it's all set up now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the roller and get it in place. Perfect. Okay. Give it one more look to make sure I didn't mess it up. Now that is straight as an arrow. Using that yardstick works every time. Now let's go ahead and take a look down at this section of the track. You've noticed I've already set it in place. I need to pull this rail back a little bit. Okay, now they're flush here. And everything is set up. So we've got the magnet. So a locomotive with a string of cars can come down here and cut loose right here and push it over this way. Or he can come out and run out into this track, and there'll be magnets out there for cutting cars loose. The actual goods shed is going to be right about here. So that will allow me to place a couple of cars here that can be unloaded into the goods yard and transferred into wagons or trucks or lorries. And then this is the section down in here that I want to sink down below grade. So what I've done, I went ahead using a Sharpie and marked out the outline that I want to cut down to. So let me go ahead and just move these out of the way, get my pins out of here, and we can go ahead and detach this section of rail from the joiners, or fish plates here, and move these back out of the way. And by the way, some questions came up about these rail joiners. Now, the different companies make different sized rail joiners, and you can get them for code 70, code 55. This particular ones that I've been using are sized for code 75 and code 83. And then there'd be another set sized for code 100. So make sure you're using the correct one. Okay, I'm going to leave those in place, and what I want to do, well actually I'm going to move them because they're going to get bounced around. Okay, we'll put them up here out of the way. Okay, so what I want to do is, I've got my short form tool here, and by the way, you can get these, you can find these easily on Amazon. I think it sells for around $14 or so from Amazon Prime, so that's free shipping. You can also get replacement blades on Amazon. Also, interestingly, there were two knockoff brands. One of them, a Craftsman, sold for around, I think, $7.98, something like that. And then there was another one that was called a Craft, or I think that was the brand name, Craft, spelled with a K, that sold for a similar amount. So you can find these on Amazon. I imagine you can probably find them in, some larger hardware stores and that kind of thing. But what I want to do now is go ahead and start working down so that we can go ahead and dig out a depression here. And this doesn't cut quite as well and as easily, and it's going to make a mess all over the place, I see, as it does with cork, okay? So just have to keep going at it. And we'll work it on down. I'm trying to keep the foam shavings from going all over the place here. I don't think I'm going to have much luck. I think they're just going to go everywhere. And one thing that I want to point out, as you're working your way down, the areas that need to be lower, you're going to be working more there. And then just come back and cut down gradually to those levels. And that way you'll get a gradient instead of a sharp change in grade. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to work more down here towards the end, like there. And then I'm going back out and giving these longer strokes. Okay. Okay, I want to stop here now, and I'm going to turn the camera off, clean up, and then we'll do a test. There, I got it all cleaned up, so everything's out of the way. Now let's see how we're doing. I think it's about as low as I want it to go. After looking at this, I don't want it to be raised up as much as the thickness of the cork. So I've got this cardboard. It's left over from one of the magnet packages. And I'm going to go ahead and just cut a little piece of cardboard to fit in here. And that's going to give me, I think, the depth that I want, okay? So let's cut it back to here and there. And let me go ahead and get my scissors. At least I think they'll cut it, and we'll see how that's going to work. Okay, so I'm going to cut that, and let's go this way. And we'll see how that fits. Okay, we're going to go in there. And let's give that another test then. Yeah, that's going to be perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and apply some adhesive under that to hold it in place, and we'll apply adhesive the rest of the line. So let me get that done. I'm just going to apply some adhesive to the bottom of the piece of cardboard. Okay, there we go. Okay, I have a metal putty knife, and that will do the job very nicely in here, since the other one won't fit. So we've got some roughness under here, but I think it's not going to be an issue once we get the ties set in here and fill things in. Okay. Good. Okay, so that's got everything in place now. Let me go ahead and drop the track in place, and we'll get that set. First, I've got to get the, I've got to reinstall my, rail joiners here. I'm going to put those on the ends of the flex track here, and we're ready to go there. Yeah. Okay, so that's in. Drop that in place here. And then we'll get our pieces of, get my T-pins and pin these down. Some people like to use regular old push pins like you would use on a bulletin board. I prefer the T-pins. If you put them at an angle, they will go ahead and hold the track down. And I've seen people that use, it look like hundreds of push pins to hold the track in place. I've never found that necessary. Okay, so let me go ahead and we get this all set in here. And we'll put in a couple of more here. Okay, so now I'm going to let this set up, and I'll be back in a few hours, and when I do, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up some plaster, and we're going to pour it in here, okay? So the only thing that you will see after we finish pouring the plaster down at this end will be the rails themselves. The ties are going to be below the level of the yard. Okay, what I'm going to do here is a little trick that David Popp used on the thin branch model railroader Project Railroad. Oh, that was back around 2011 or 12, something like that, 8 or 9 years ago. And basically what he did was he took and made up a batch of hydrocal plaster and poured it into this area in the track. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And for that, I have this Woodland Scenics product here called Smooth It, and it's part of their road system product line. And I don't know if it's a hydrocal or just plaster or what, but basically it's used for paved areas such as highways, roads, streets, curbs, sidewalks, and railroad crossings. So that's what we're going to use it for here. So to start, you basically shake it for 30 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a few, shake it for a while off camera, because I don't want this stuff to basically get out and go anywhere. And then they say to mix it in a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts plaster to 1 part cold water, and then let it stand for 2 minutes and then mix thoroughly for 2 minutes. And then pour it into the prepared area. So, and what I've done here, I've marked certain areas because this area here, up to here, the ties are completely below the level of the surrounding foam. So we want to bring that up to the level of the, over the ties at least. And then from here to here, you progress from being under the plaster to a point where finally about here, the ties are completely above the level of the foam itself. The rail heads are just slightly above the level of the, if you see, you can just barely catch it. So at this point, the rail heads will be slightly above the level of the plaster once it dries. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mix this up And I think I'm gonna try to make a slightly soupier consistency than what they recommend, because this has to pour in there and smooth out evenly. So I'm gonna start out with their 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, so I've got this little measuring spoon here. So this is, I think that's 1.5 tablespoons. So I'm gonna use 2 of those, okay? Got a little plastic spoon here for mixing it in, or with. And then I'm gonna add a spoonful of cold water. And we'll start mixing that. We're gonna let that, I'm gonna put it in here. And then let that sit, they say, for 2 minutes. Okay, that's been about 2 minutes. So let's go ahead and do the mixing part. And if this comes out very, very thick, I want this closer to something between pancake and consistency and buttermilk. And this is coming out very, very thick. So I'm going to add a little bit more water to it and get that to a soupy mixture consistency. Break up some of the clods in here and the clumps. I don't know, that's starting to get close to what I was looking for. It's getting close to pancake batter consistency. So that should pour fairly nicely. Okay, that's about 2 minutes. Now, let's go ahead and pour it into the depression here. And let's see how this works, and if we have to, I can scrape a little bit more out of there. So I've cut a piece of cork road bed so that it's going to fit down in here. And now I'm going to spread it. First down to this end here, and then we're going to come up and hopefully get everything distributed in here. Okay, there. Now I'm just going to drag it right on up here and spread it on out. I think I'm going to need a little extra right here in the transition zone. Okay, and we'll do some more spreading here. Okay, I'm going to clean off my tool. This is a multi-purpose tool. And this piece has been cut so it fits between the rails. So I'm just going to bring it up like this and spread that plaster out from the center. Do that a couple of times so that we've got it cleaned out. And then also work on the sides here. Okay, now we can start to scrape off some of this excess. and get it out of the way. Okay, there, and one more run down the center. Get that cleaned out in there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let that sit there a couple of minutes, or a few minutes, until it's starting to set up. And then once it starts to set up, I'm going to come back with another piece of cork road bed that has the angled or the bevel on the side. And then what I'm going to do is take that bevel and run it along the inside of the web of the rails to clean them off before that plaster starts to set up in there. Okay, it started to go green, so let me go ahead. Like I said, I've got my little piece of beveled cork road bed here. So I'm just going to bring this in right here along the web of the rail and clean that out. Come on up here a little bit further, like that. This area right through there. And then I have to do this inside here too. And it's safer to use a piece of cork like this as opposed to a metal putty knife or something, because you don't want to damage your spikes on your that are holding the rails themselves in place. I can't do anything else now. I'm going to have to let this sit. So this is something that you'll have to wait until Monday to see how it's going to work out. So take it easy, and we'll see you on Monday with the follow-up video on how this does, and we'll take on some other jobs.